sent them today, I said, no, like he wasn't around for sketch. Well, did you get my email this afternoon? State among the when we do the test ballots, it's supposed to be posted somewhere. Like it says, you told our website. You'll see it's an email. Got the date and the time, it's next week.
I'll call the meeting to order at 6:30. First agenda review, we have two sets of minutes to review. Pick up the first one first, which is the week before last. That's the 8th of January. And one of our members made some written changes. Was that Jennifer? And she's not here, so if somebody wants to make those, if you look at the minutes, you're going to see on the right column her comments on the changes. And
The one comment I had about that, Chairman, is let's see, on page 7, Eleanor?
Yeah.
When we went for the vote, that was the $2,000 less on the final budget for the fire department.
Yes.
It says that it was concerning bunker gear.
Mm-hmm. That's what protective clothing is called.
That was it.
That is
Okay,
the
so you
title.
just put protective clothing on it.
I think it said protective clothing, remember, and I asked EJ the question, is that what they used to call bunker gear, they call it, said yes.
Let me read it.
It's the stuff that all the
He
coaches.
reduced it in equipment maintenance.
And I thought it was radio maintenance or equipment maintenance. I thought the committee left protective clothing alone
That's what I'm
for
saying.
the
Do you remember,
time
John?
being.
I thought we left them alone.
I thought we did too. I think you mentioned.
I thought that the $2,000 was coming out of, the subscription thing.
So it says, just to be, Jay Belanger would like to reduce the fire department budget by 2,000, and we discussed it in the paragraph above. And then he calls for a vote. The new amount would be, Brandon moved to recommend it at the new amount. Ken second in the motion, contingent upon the BOS receiving a list of current bunker gear with an expiration. That's completely separate from the equipment maintenance that Jamie reduced it. Ken,
Because it was a radio maintenance line item. So I'm just curious, when I read it, I thought, man, did we say that we needed to reduce their bunker gear?
no,
No. it's
no, only
equipment
2,000
maintenance. Or
out of the
radio
radio maintenance, correct. In the paragraph above it, it says it.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, the one yes, we can reduce radio maintenance by 2,000.
Okay. So after that, it says,
Just gotta-
Ken seconded the motion contingent upon the board of selectmen receiving a list of current bunker gear. So that's for the budget in totality,
Yeah.
right?
Correct,
Okay,
yes.
so we wanna review that
Correct.
separately. That doesn't have anything to do with the 2,000.
No,
Yeah.
exactly.
Gotcha, thank you.
That's the way it is second.
Let's take up Jennifer's recommendation. The first one I think is life expectancy is 25 years to be replaced. That's on page 2. The last notice, she says, life expectancy is 25 years due to replacement. She wants to add that. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
Okay. So just more detail she's adding to that. Okay.
Do you need a motion on that, John?
Yeah, maybe we could do it.
We
do all
I've agreed with everyone but the last one, so if we could go through them and if everybody's happy with them, somebody could give me a
So
little
all the
motion.
changes on this side will be amendments to what we saw last week. So
Yeah.
we've already amended the budget as presented, we'll call it that way, when we get there.
Or I meant, do we need a motion to amend the minutes?
Well, we haven't
We
made
haven't
a vote
voted.
yet. No, we haven't. So either way.
So we tabled the minutes, so we could just make a motion to accept the minutes as written unless there's something that's different.
Yeah.
I have a couple.
That's present.
You're talking about, are we talking about the fire department minutes of January eighth?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, we had tabled them, so we wanna try to approve them tonight. That's what we're working on, yes.
I have a couple other, edits on page 2, at the top of the page.
Okay.
And Roy explained that the town's, I'm guessing, attorney or somebody had town's,
No,
Attorney, good catch, thank you.
Okay.
yep. And then I also had another one on page 4, Article 9, the bottom. I was curious, looks like I seconded the motion, but I was curious who made the motion, the original motion. That's
I
okay.
can go look
I
at
don't know.
those.
We'll have to figure that out. I can go through my videotapes
I'll
too,
go,
but
yeah, I'm sorry, I'll put that in.
this one here, Article 9.
So we're missing a motion there?
Yeah, who made the motion?
Alright.
I always make motion.
Yeah,
I'll just
it's
look at
fine.
my
It's
notes.
just, yeah. Okay, yeah, that's.
Maybe you can research that, okay. In terms of Jennifer's, the only thing I had, we talked about the caps for the back of the trucks. The original minutes said each truck, from my understanding, for each truck they purchased, whether, no matter how many they purchased, they wanted a cap for. Is that, somebody,
That's not the case, because one of them was going to be, take the forestry gear.
all right, so that wouldn't need one, you're right.
So
And
it's-
then we'll buy two, so it is just one truck, then one cap.
Well, that's what carry forestry gear, which they couldn't have a cap on, the other was for equipment, which they would have.
Needed a cap, all right, we're only talking at this point about two trucks.
You wanted
Correct,
two-
only we recommended a single.
We only recommended one.
Right, right, which I think
So,
is what.
we'll go with one truck. I mean, we can change it to one in that case.
Okay.
It's not a big deal, we'll worry about caps when we get there, depending on how many trucks we actually approve. Okay, so that'll be, we'll go with that one. And I think, if all, any other changes by anyone else?
Yeah, page 7, I just wanted to correct one total. First paragraph, third line from the end. When the chief had said the protective clothing bunker gear total outfit was $4,000, based on a purchase they just put in a month ago, it's $3,077.
But he said 4,000 in the meeting.
Right, it's, yeah,
Yeah.
and I was gonna say, that's correct.
Oh,
Oh, it is correct.
oh,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
He said the 4,000.
Yeah.
Fine,
For our information.
yes,
Yeah, but you said the actual number is.
Got it,
3,077.
sorry.
So, if there are no others, and if everyone agrees with Jennifer's changes, then somebody could move the minutes as
Is everybody's changed?
So moved.
in her change as well.
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, all in favor of accepting the minutes of January 8th as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great.
I'll abstain, I wasn't here.
That's right. The next set of minutes would be, what is it, 14th or 50. Okay, that's the town budget. I want to compliment Eleanor. I thought it was a long, complicated meeting, and she did a great job on the minutes.
I actually told that to her face yesterday.
There you go.
It's-
That's right.
It's more detail than needed, but I'm glad to see it.
Yeah, better err on the side of more detail.
Oh, yeah. I
But
mean,
you're right. It
By
was
the
more-
law, by the rules, we've done.
I was pleasantly surprised that there was that much detail. So, thank you.
Hard to keep track
Yeah,
in this group.
it is, particularly in this group. That's right. Okay, any changes? Yes.
On the first page, when we talked about micro surfacing, this process lasts between 3 and 5 years. So I think what we were trying to say is that if we did that the road would last another 3 to 5 years, is that correct? Not the
Right.
process itself?
Right,
Okay. So maybe if we could clarify that, that would help. And then on page 3, under land management budget review, it was actually, Jennifer Weiner who had asked about the gate maintenance, not myself.
Oh.
Any other changes or comments on the minutes for the 15th? Good catch on that. Yes, one more?
Sorry, one more. On page 6, under major roads, capital reserve warrant article, I would just, for clarity purposes, where it says this road would help with traffic on Woodbury Ave and would give access to more development in this area, if we could add private development, like as in not town owned, like we don't own that land, I think it would provide some clarity to someone who is not sitting in this room during that discussion.
Okay, I guess that sounds reasonable. Is that true? It's all private, the town doesn't own any of that?
Correct.
Okay, sure, that makes sense. That certainly was the intent, that it would be private development and add to the tax base. Okay, good. Any further comments or additions, changes to the minutes? All in favor of the minutes of January 15th as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention? Good, thank you.
I'm sorry, was
Make a motion.
there a motion and a second that I missed?
So moved.
I'm sorry, yes, that's good.
Thank you.
We just might have jumped out. Is there a second to the,
I do.
all right.
By default.
Yeah.
Good.
Jack
I
by
waved
default.
at her.
You don't gotta just jack by
That's
default.
what I'm really, boy. You can do it, I'm really.
We now have a school budget. Normally, I appreciate it, nice compact folder here. Normally, we give the school board or the school representative a chance to explain their budget in total, and then we'll go into specific questions. So does everyone like to speak to the overall budget?
Thank you, Self-Charter Superintendent SAU 51st. I'd like to thank the Budget Committee for having us this evening. I am joined by Principal Pete Latchow to my right, but I'd also like to take this opportunity to introduce members of the senior staff from the SAU. So in the back of the room is Kelly Killen, Assistant Superintendent of Schools, Sarah Reinhardt, Director of Special Education, Brian Grattan, Director of Technology, and Mindy Ryan, our school business administrator. So as we go through the budget, if there are specific questions by department or particular line items, members of the senior staff can join in and answer those questions as well.
I'm happy that you all came out.
Yep.
So well represented.
The proposed budget that you see this evening for your review and discussion represents a total increase of almost $68,000 over the current FY 2020 budget, or 3.1%. So there are some drivers that influence that, particularly some personnel changes that had been recommended by Principal Latchow, fully vetted by the central office team as well as the Newington School Board. Also some contractual obligations, particularly with the teacher's contract, a proposed increase of 7.1% guaranteed maximum rate to health insurance. So some of those main drivers are influencing the budget that we have before you this evening. So I'll turn it over to Mindy to kind of walk you through, and certainly we'll be able to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, I think that's fine. At one point, I want to address your instructional budget, which did a lot of personnel changing there. But we can talk about that when it comes up. So if people would like to walk through the budget and raise questions as Mindy brings them up, is that a good format? And you could just sort of roll through the budget.
Sure.
And then people will stop you and ask questions. And they're free to go back and move around.
Sure, thank you. So in front of you has the table of contents that has all the documents that are prepared to present this budget to you tonight. In the first section are the warrants. So Article 1 has that total for $2,259,131. And a warrant for an expendable trust to deposit, to vote, raise, appropriate sum of $20,000. For the Buildings and Trust Fund, Buildings and Grounds Trust Fund, that will come from unassigned fund balance. Those are the two warrants.
Okay, why don't we, I will take a motion on the, Article 1 figure now, just to start the discussion, so it's subject to amendment.
We'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All right, all right, and we'll hold off on Article 2 until the end, just to keep it clean. Okay.
Great. The
So
second.
discussion,
Oh,
discussion is on, and you have the floor, but feel free to
Sure.
ask questions.
Sure, the second document, shows the proposed budget 2021 to the right side. And before that, we have 1920, which represents the budget we're in now, and then 1819 represented by budget and actuals. Overall, as Mr. Sal pointed out, we have the 2,259,131 with an overall increase of 3.1 to the budget. That's the number that's in warrant Article 1, because it's the general fund operating budget of 2.185327 with federal grants for 40,000 and the food service at 33,804, which are outside of the general fund, but together make up that operating budget. The following document is a summary of the budget. We've gone through just 2 versions of this budget.
So you're talking about tab 2 now?
Yes, it's the third. There's the warrants, the colored graph, then the third, the document under that. I don't know if you have it. Yeah, you have the tabs right there. Okay. That's the budget summary. So this is it says budget version 2 because we've gone through only 2 versions of this budget. In working with our administrative team and then bringing it to the board, discussing and their approval of that, we were set with the budget, and then we had a joint board meeting for SAU 50. Once they made the final vote on the SAU budget, the portion for Newington's district share changed. So the only change from version 1 to 2 for us was the change in the SAU budget. This is the final budget prepared to you tonight that matches the warrant article.
Okay, this may be a good time, I'm on page 1.
Right, instruction begins on page 1.
I'd like
Yep.
to address that if I may.
Sure.
I noticed that you have an increase of over 75,000 in teacher salaries. Basically, I think it boils down to you want 1 new teacher, that's a full FTE. So maybe you'd start with that one, and then I'll just review then, you're looking for a 1/10 of an FTE to increase the art teacher and a 1/4 of an FTE for guidance, and you're dropping a para-educator to save $33,442. Okay,
Where'd you find all that information?
Right.
well, it's in there.
It's in there.
Okay.
But that's what it, the 75,000 jumps at me, and then as I went through the details,
Yes.
I understood how that was happening. Why do we need 1 new teacher?
Sure, I can start. First off, when I started as a principal at Newington Public School 8 years ago, we had an enrollment of 34 students. So I'm looking at a projected enrollment next year of almost 60 students. Looks as though, actually in speaking with parents of upcoming kindergarten students, there's a pretty big class that's rolling in there. And so to manage and meet all of our students' needs, what we started with this year is I actually brought in a para position this year that was a full-time building sub that was providing support staff to the grade 1 and 2 classroom, or support teaching. And what we found is that's really working well. So this position would not only continue as the full-time building sub, but then also carry over and allow us to be the instructional coach in math and literacy. Because what that allows us to do then, what we can't do as far as with a para is this would be a full-time teacher that does not have a classroom. She would be coming around and supporting the different classrooms, or this person would be a full-time teacher, coming around supporting different classrooms and allowing us to meet the needs of our students, and critically our tier 2 intervention. So really making sure that all of our students are, their individual learning needs are being met. Remember, our classrooms are multi-classrooms. So when you get up to 20 students and you're trying to teach 2 grades, per se, in 1 class, it really presents quite a bit of challenge.
So you're not changing the grade separations of the grade groupings?
No.
But
We'll still have 4 classrooms.
yeah, and you're basically then replacing a full-time para educator with a full-time certified teacher.
Yes.
Okay, is it worth the money?
Yes, because the biggest difference is a para is wonderful in providing supports to a classroom, but a para cannot lead instruction with students. That needs to be, that instruction needs to be led by a teacher, developed by a teacher, and a para can come in and support that. But this would really allow us to have those opportunities of really pulling out and meeting each of our students' needs for different small group instruction that this particular teacher could lead.
So outside of substitute days, is there any time where your full-time certified teacher would be teaching their own class, and why?
They wouldn't necessarily have their own like grade 3 classroom. What they would have was they would be serving as our math and literacy coach, pulling out those small groups, co-teaching within the classrooms. So if it's for instance, our grade 1-2 classroom, one thing that we've done or roll in to do, depending on that classroom size, that teacher may come in and teach a grade 1 while the other teaches grade 2, as opposed to splitting it half and half, depending again on those numbers that were in that classroom.
And those roles are required to have a certified educator?
If you remember way back in the Dick Michaels days, he used to teach math. He'd come in and the teacher, because they get a break sometime during the day, the kids aren't alone, they get a principal in there teaching the math. The other thing is, historically, lately, it's really not easy to get substitute teachers. The market is smaller and smaller, the demand is as big as ever. Having an in-house one means that the secretary doesn't show up today, Pete doesn't have to play 2 roles necessarily, and they get the emails now. The secretary don't call me, things, so it gives you that more flexibility too.
Strictly, you'd have that flexibility with a full-time para.
Well, like you said, the para couldn't come in and teach math class while his teachers are working with the other half.
So I guess my other question is, are substitutes always certified teachers?
Don't have 2 years of college, it was like.
The difference would be though, rather than doing a substitute plan, they could do actual instruction, content, and continue the class forward, as opposed to following the plan given to them.
I already know the answer to this, but for the board's sake, do we have a reading specialist at our school?
No, we don't.
And how much would a reading specialist be to get a full-time reading specialist there?
Defer that probably to Ms. Reinhardt, who would you, that would be another.
That would be another, we have a certified
Yeah.
teacher and a certified position, and with a reading specialist, they're typically fairly hard to find because they tend to have a lot of experience that goes with them. So you're looking at a person who's above and beyond a master's, so like a master's halfway up the scale, roughly.
So my point is that, we don't have that at our school right now, and I think that to kind of bridge the gap between what, some of the needs of the students are, as well as the size of the classrooms, having someone who's focusing on math and literacy makes sense to me.
It's interesting, we discussed staffing when we had like 38 students. And we said we can absorb a few more without increasing, but now you're thinking about 60, which is more than 2/3 more or better. What would it look like if you're aiming at 60? How do you see the division of the numbers and the breakup of the classes?
So it's a really good question, and to be honest with you, I wouldn't want to.
Just roughly give us an idea.
Like.
Or maybe tell me where you're at now and how it might change.
Yeah, so right now what we've done, again, we're flexible, our classes are not rigid. So we look at what our needs are of our students, and that's how we then go through and divide our classes up. That being said, this year we've done something a little bit different. We have a K1 class. We have a 1-2 class, so that's a large number of first grade students, we split them apart. We have a 3-4, and then a 5-6. So our total in the kindergarten class this year is 12 students. There is 15 in the other, so the K1 is 12, and the 1-2 is 15, 11 in the 3-4, and 12 in the 5-6.
Okay. That comes out of like 48 pupils or something.
Yeah, currently our enrollment is
Now
40.
you're anticipating maybe 60?
Yes.
And where would they be, all over or mostly in the younger grades?
Mostly in the younger grades, but this year our kindergarten class is about 6 students, and we're projecting 10 to 13 students in our
So you probably
kindergarten.
go as a pure K next year then?
I would say, I mean, that's hard to say without looking at our whole group.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
Still, so it's gonna be 4, technically 4 classrooms, but.
Yeah, we'll still have
what
the
you're saying
four.
is that you really have movable educational groups.
And that's one thing that we've really worked hard in within our school in the last few years. If you look in, those of you that are familiar with Newington Public School, when you walk in and go down that main hallway, we almost consider that to be our lower school, the K to 2. And those groupings of students and kind of floating around back and forth, really seeing that this year, so that students can go where their needs are academically. And then when you go to the left, that new addition is the 3 through 6, our upper school. And again, students are floating between both those classrooms depending on what their needs are.
So you anticipate having 4 classrooms, 5 full-time teachers,
Yes.
plus some part-time specialists as well.
We'll have our part-time specialists that would cover, the PE, unified arts classes and things like that.
Yeah, okay, so
And then one special ed para-education.
one is paraeducation,
One that's, a dedicated special ed para.
Do special education.
special ed, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Interesting point of, talking to the town clerk, getting ready, for the vital statistics for the town report, oh, you won birth in Newington last year. After, the influx of 12, all of a sudden, so it's always,
Yeah.
must be the water changed.
Pete, is it too early to know how many kids will be tuitioned in 2021?
So that also is driven, we don't accept our tuition students until we have our enrollment, right? Because we don't want to continue to accept students and then make our class sizes so large that it impacts our students, the Newington students.
Yeah, how many do you have this year?
7.
What would the impact be if we didn't have tuition paying students on your proposed budget? Would that change things at all?
For next year, projected, I'm looking at 3 to 4, and they're all spread out, so it's to be 1 less in each class about.
If you didn't pick up any new.
Correct.
3 or 4 of them are gonna.
It's not like we have, several years ago, some of you might be familiar, where we had a large number of students that came to us, 10 students that tuitioned in from Greenland that were all kindergarten students. We don't have that number in the classroom currently, and I wouldn't expect that moving forward.
Is there a selection criteria you use to determine how many of these tuition paying students we accept, or?
Well, there's a whole selection process, a whole review process that we have set up, an application process at the school. and that's
Speaking
one
from
of
a
the-
budgetary standpoint, are there any drivers that maybe put you over the top where you wouldn't want to accept more versus?
We even before looking at class size numbers,
Yeah.
yes, we do have numbers set that the board has made recommendations to. But that depends on the class age. For instance, a kindergarten compared to a 5-6 class.
Yeah, we had a study done this year as to the optimum and maximum number of students per classroom. What's the total? Is it 62 or 55?
For the school, yeah, I believe it was, sorry, off the top of my head, I don't recall exactly, it was between 62 and 65, I'm not sure exactly.
Getting really close to that.
Well, like I said, this year we only had 1 birth. We got about 12 kids coming in, so unless there's more developments in town or.
Small sample, you get a lot of variation.
Right.
Why do we need a quarter extra in guidance?
So we didn't have a guidance.
Oh, no.
So the state recommends that you have to have a guidance position. We have not had one. We've hired one for the past several years as a contracted service.
Yeah.
And so this would be actually adding a guidance, which makes a lot more sense.
In place of the contract service.
In place of the contracted service to have someone within, and also, again, going back to meeting our needs of our students. Having that guidance counselor in our building, you realize what a crucial role they do play in the need for that.
There's a longevity issue. Ideally, this guidance person would be there through a kid's career through the school.
You would hope you get to know that student and stay with them, yes. Yeah, and with a contracted service, you don't necessarily know that's a year to year and so forth.
Couple more things.
Sure.
What was the COLA we applied to salaries for this year?
For the professional staff, I believe it's 2.8, roughly around that number.
This is
I don't
like
have
the
the
principal and the
68.
secretary. Anyone
For
non-contract?
non-union
Non-union.
employees, 2.75 is the recommendation.
Is it a 3 or 5 year contract, Sal? Or in,
Teachers,
yeah,
the existing one is 5 years.
5 years. And when they do the contract, it covers the COLAs each of the years in the town. The first year has a warrant article, accepts it, and then the cost for that is it. There's no one to be added on.
And then, of course, they're eligible for steps.
Yeah, And one more thing on the other budgetary things that we look at, we always have a column where the board of selectmen weigh in with a recommendation. How come we don't do that with the school budget?
Because you're a separate entity, correct?
Right.
It's the
What
school.
was the question? I'm sorry.
The school board is the selectmen, are the selectmen.
Yes, the school budget does not fall through the selectmen for recommendation. It's even a separate town meeting.
Good point, it's interesting, that's the way it's over there. Finally, just while we're on staffing, you're increasing the art by a tenth of it, not a lot. What's the theory behind that?
So currently, when you look at a 10% position, that's about little less than, it's 2 hours and 46 minutes.
Okay.
So this would allow, we also incorporated into our curriculum STEAM, so incorporating the science, technology, and bringing that all in, right? And so what this does is bringing that art piece in and really allowing that art teacher to enrich a lot of our projects that we're working on within the classroom, and spending more time and helping bring and diversify to all of our curriculum work that we're doing. Because when you break that down, it really works out to be a little bit less than 40 minutes per class once a week,
This is the
currently.
current, which you have, which is 1/10.
Mhm.
So you're going to 2/10, you'd have more time.
Yeah, more time, more interaction with students, really allowing them to enrich some of their projects. And what the plan is going to be and what that will look like is really that teacher will be working much more as a co-teacher within the classrooms and helping support a lot of that work that's taking place and enrich that from the arts standpoint.
So how, would that be 1 day a week or 2 half days a week? How would you, it's gonna be, yeah, because it's 20%.
Yeah, this will, once we get into that and have that position, we'll sit down and look at our whole schedule and see how that best fits in.
Okay.
But that's kind of the nice part about what we have that flexibility where each year a lot of those things change, and given what we have and what we see the needs being within that building.
Yes.
I have a question about staffing. So when you're increasing kind of here and there, the staffing, is that something that we're gonna see the current teacher continue with that role, or current guidance counselor continue with that role, or how does that work? Do you have to post, I mean, what is the process like on that?
Well, would you like to talk to that process?
Well, certainly there are some requirements under collective bargaining and, what we routinely do when we create a new position. So the position will be advertised and we will require bidding on the position, and outside individuals as well as interested individuals within house current employees certainly would be welcome to apply.
But
Just
it would be
curious how
important to
we-
know, but it's important to also know, yeah, things do have to move, but for instance, we've had a lot of turnover with I shouldn't say a lot. We had a guidance counselor that was a contracted service, and then she moved, and then we had a new person came in that is actually in that role currently right now as the 25%.
Okay.
25% is a contracted service or 25% is an employee?
Right now, we were able to make that be an employee, but it was an add-on, and that was based on really trying to make that, it started off as a contracted service, but then trying to get, speaking to, I think, what Mrs. Savinelli was saying, really trying to find that continuity, and especially in a position like guidance, not having something that was turning over annually, and really building that in to where we had, it has to, according to the recommendation from the Department of Education, you need to have a guidance counselor on staff. And so
is this continuing in 2021 as a 25% or is it increasing?
stay at the 25%.
Stay at the 20%. So basically it's just.
But we didn't have it in this year's budget. It was an addition that
Understood.
we added to. That's why you'll see that as that corner. portion in your budget.
Is the 25% employee, are they covered by health insurance and retirement?
No, we just,
Not eligible.
no, just the involuntary benefits, FICA, and that's what's in the budget.
Okay, that's all, yeah,
Yeah.
so it's not the other benefits.
Mhm.
I will say also, just adding to the .25 position, it limits the candidate pool, it restricts the candidate pool. A person who previously provided services as a contracted service provider actually applied for a position in another school district, neighboring school district, and went to a full-time position. So it's very difficult at times, particularly with a small student population and smaller FTEs, to attract individuals. As you can tell, people aren't gonna leave a full-time position in another district to assume a .25 position, regardless of how qualified they may or may not be. So it limits the candidate pool, and it presents a challenge for the school.
I don't want to stop the question, but maybe the business manager, you could move through some of these.
Sure.
We sort of got bogged down in instruction, that's what we should do, in my opinion, that's the crux of it.
That's the core of our business.
Right.
But we can move on unless you have more specific teaching questions.
I just had a couple of questions. You'd mentioned tuition paying students. How many of those are there?
Right now, in our budget, 7.
And what are they charged per year?
It is,
Varies.
yeah.
What's the median, the average?
I think there's a couple categories. One is that employees dependent, like if a teacher was out of town and was when they can, that's a lower rate than just someone coming from another district. I think the highest is around 7,000.
So if it was a
Yeah.
private citizen coming in, it would be roughly about $7,000.
So, yeah, I saw the total revenues could be 52,000, so if you divide that by 7, it just comes out to around $7,000. And I was curious, how many elementary school students are there versus high school? So you said there's 38 elementary and then.
Well, no, currently right now, we have 48 elementary students, K to 6.
Okay. And then how many high school?
There's a schedule on here.
So
There's a schedule.
There's a schedule.
Yeah.
It shows the number.
Yeah.
Just so you know, it's not that tuition is not a random figure. We actually get presented the average tuition for the private schools, the St. Pat's,
St. Pat's,
kids
St.
the average
Mary's,
of all
and
of the
Sacred
tuitions
Heart.
they would pay to go to a private school, that's what we charge. So it's not something just random.
For the kid, for the children being tuition in Newington, that's what you're.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, kids come.
Not with Portsmouth children.
No, we don't have any choice there.
Yeah, okay.
If you look on, what is it, tab 4 or 5, it's got a projected enrollment for the 4 high school grades of 22. And then I guess there's a middle school projection too.
Yeah, 9 to 11. There's a couple, what, 2 extra?
Yes, two extra in there.
In case somebody moves into town, we have to tuition, and we always put a little bit of a
It's stated in there.
safety factor.
In case somebody else moves in. And 8 for the 2 middle school grades. That's projected for next academic year.
One extra.
It includes 1 extra in each category, so you got some growth space just in case. Okay.
Mindy, if you don't mind going through the text, language arts textbooks, and, well, I guess those aren't textbooks, but those are art books.
I think it's
I
language.
So
Should
we're,
have that.
yeah, language
I can
arts.
do that.
Yeah.
So what I started doing about 4 years ago, Mr. Arsenal, is that I chose one area of the curriculum to revamp overhaul. So the first year we did science. Then we did, really put in a lot of money towards, actually redid our whole math. And then we also built in there our technology piece, because where we used to be able to subsidize that all through REAP grants, our hardware stuff, we're not able to do that anymore. So what you're seeing in that increase, that $5,000 versus $5,700 number, that represents us rolling out a new, or updating really our English language arts in our 4 classrooms. So what that specifically would be is actually rebuilding and restructuring our leveled libraries within the classroom, updating a lot of the books which haven't been updated, and really allowing the teachers those flexibility to do that.
How old are the existing texts for art?
That's not art, excuse me.
I'm sorry.
So that's language arts?
Language
Yeah.
art books.
So we don't use a textbook for language arts, we use Readers Writers Workshop. So what that would consist of is building creating classroom read aloud books or small group books, building a level library within the classroom so there's very diverse choices. So students really are going in and picking books that are at their level and working through those. And we want the students to have that choice to be able to do that within that classroom.
So you say each year you take a subject matter and you know what, invest in it. How many different blocks do you have that you rotate?
Right now it is, I use 5 blocks.
Okay. So you get to one every 5 years to.
That's my goal, and that's was one thing that I started again about 4 years ago.
Sounds like good management. All right. Because the material gets dated or worn out, or new stuff is invented, I guess.
Are we still on instruction?
You can move on, did you want to move on? Yeah, go ahead, Brandon.
Oh, yeah.
Walk us
Okay.
You can walk us
So
through.
pages 1 through 3 have your instruction categories. So unless you had any other particular questions about those subjects, I just wanted to point out one more item there from 1920 budget that we're currently into the proposed budget. You'll see some reallocation within the lines. The video communications object code 533, that's where software used to be budgeted. We changed it, made sure that it had the code that follows along with the GAAP accounting code of 650. So you'll see some negative numbers, but it's been reallocated. So even though there's a 0, it just went to the proper 650 line, and you'll see those throughout the different subject areas. After the subjects, on page 3 starts special education. There's some decreases there, and maybe Sarah can talk to special ed a little bit.
Sure, go ahead.
Sure, so the special ed budget is reflective of the students that we currently are responsible for. There's different sections. One would be the section for the Newington Public School, and then would be the section for students that we might have responsibility for at Portsmouth Middle or then Portsmouth High School, or any students aged 18 to 21 who requires transition services for preschool students. All of that falls under special education. And our budget is done every year based upon the needs of our children that we have currently and or some that we may anticipate that might be in the referral process and would be identified by next year.
For any new members, just it's worth noting, as she said, that our responsibility goes up to age 21.
Correct.
It includes junior high and high school. Portsmouth doesn't pick that up for free. It also, most of this is state mandated.
It's federal law.
Federal
law.
So it's a required expenditure up to a certain standard, I guess.
Yes.
It's required. Okay, good. What's our budget line again?
So special education starts at the 1210s.
Okay, so the whole thing is special ed.
Page 3 and 4.
Yeah. So we got
It's flat.
Pretty flat, yeah.
Again, for some board members who may be new, if you have a certain family move to town and one requires extensive out-of-town tuition and services, transportation, all that can ruin some towns.
The budget.
Oh, yeah.
So we have a fund, we didn't need to put any money in this year, and we filled it up, so if that happens, you not have a really shock to your budget, we can plug the building maintenance fund.
Yeah, it's,
I don't know what is it, about 80,000 or something?
It's in
We have to
one
schedule
of the
one.
minors in the back.
This is the example I always share, because I can, my daughter's identified in need of special education, and I can always waive her FERPA rights, right, her privacy rights, because I'm her parent. And we work in such small school districts that, she will later when she's older, she'll be thanking me. But we work in such small districts that I never want to identify a special education student. So my daughter's not very complex, she's dyslexic and she is also hearing impaired. If I were to move to the town, the estimated increase to your budget would be 40 grand, just to program for her, because she's gonna need a specialized program system, she's gonna need an educational audiologist, she's gonna need a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing, she's gonna need PT 5 days a week, OT 5 days a week. Like, this is kind of her profile. So that's why we have this special ed trust fund, this unanticipated trust fund, because she moves in and she's not a very complex learner. She just happens to have a lot of needs that for a smaller school become significant when we contract them out. So that's why we keep that trust fund there.
Didn't you used to have that, some towns really got crazy figures.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. If you're a town with very small resources.
40,000 might be on the low side for some things too.
Well, truly, I mean, in all fairness, once we were done dealing what needs to be done to the school and the technology, it could be as high as 60,000 just, and that's just for her to be educated in the school. That's not any other activities that we would need support for afterwards.
Special ed teacher salary is up 6%, which is beyond what the COLA is. Is that including a step? Is that the idea there?
I would have to defer that to Mr. Chai in the collective bargaining agreement.
The special educators and you?
Yeah, the special educator teacher salary, 12, 10, 20.
Regardless of, department, if you will, certified staff all fall under the auspices of the CBA. So a fourth, fifth grade teacher, special educator, case manager, under the same collective bargaining agreement.
So it would probably be a step then within.
Right.
A step or a degree earned perhaps, or.
It's average 2 to 3% generally.
Okay, continuing on, pages 4 and 5 still have some areas that Sarah can speak to. There's ESY, then your related services, guidance, nursing, psychological, speech, OT, PT. So if you want to take a look at those pages 5 and 6, see if you have any further questions on those.
After school enrichment, is there revenue on that side also?
That is not special
Oh,
education, so I'm
right,
gonna defer to,
that's-
Mr. Lepchap for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes,
It actually, the way that program is set up is that it's a self-sustaining program. So you'll see it later in the budget, that revenue actually.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question. Under, it's 1280, the preschool. So is that the admission and fees, what is that for?
So which one are you looking at? The preschool contracted services or the preschool tuition to LEAs?
It just says preschool 1280, admissions and fees.
Okay.
That actually,
Page 4.
so that drops, it's a little confusing, that preschool is above that,
Oh,
and then
okay.
below that is
Okay,
those are our
Thank you, yes.
trips and stuff.
Okay.
What is the preschool contracted services from?
So we have an SAU 50 preschool, so we are obligated as a school district to provide special education and related services if necessary to all children beginning at age 3. And so we have an SAU 50 preschool that is a language-based environment. We have a speech and language assistant that's overseen by a speech pathologist, and we have a classroom para who has a degree in early childhood education, plus experience teaching in early childhood settings and training in behavior programming implementation, overseen by a board-certified behavioral analyst. So through the arrangement of the preschool and how we funded it, we are able to provide BCBA support, we are able to provide OT, we are able to provide Northeast Passage and speech services with no additional cost to the districts. However, if a child needs something, speaking like if my daughter were to be attending, it would require an educational audiologist, for example. That would be something that our preschool just isn't built to support. Therefore, a district might have to pay for that separate, and that would appear on the preschool contracted services line. What we've done is really diversify our staff, so our speech and language pathologist is also a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing. So if we have any children, we've already kind of buffered that for school districts as much as possible. But if we do notice that a child has a service that's above and beyond what our preschool can absorb and offer, the districts just have to contribute to the cost of that.
Okay, that was interesting. I hadn't heard about a preschool before. So the preschool basic operational expenses are covered by the global SAU 50 budget.
So there are 2 staff members in the new budget for this year, in the SAU budget, because what's happened, it's been covered by our IDEA and preschool grant, which has been altered significantly over the past year. And ironically, Newington is the only town that did not see a decrease in their grant. One town went down to $14. which was a little shocking. We actually thought it was a typo. I called the state. I'm like, you made a mistake, right? Because you just wrote down $14. You just didn't actually mean that. And so our grant just can't sustain it. So what we've done is to have our staff be there the amount of time we need them to provide this opportunity for children. We've had to move that to the SAU budget.
So financially, Sarah, the 4875 is a decrease, first of all, so I'm curious to know why, but also that is just that's just the town of Newington share. Is that right? Of a
That's
community?
Newington's decrease, if it is a decrease in Newington's share of that budget.
The preschool contracted services is what the students that are Newington is responsible for that need above and beyond what the SAU 50 would provide.
Thank you. All right, that makes more sense. Thank you very much.
Okay. On page 6, we go into professional growth, professional membership dues, library, media services. Those two categories are pretty much flat.
I'm looking at speech therapist.
Oh, yeah, that was all part of our,
That was
related
your-
services?
that's
Yep.
your-
Yeah.
because we
Speech
discussed that.
therapist, contracted services?
Yeah.
Okay. So we utilize speech therapists in multiple ways. Many of our speech therapists that we utilize are specialists in reading instruction. So if we have students that have really kind of complex learning profiles and we need someone to specialize in how do we integrate their speech and language needs, which isn't also spoken language, but how we understand language into their reading program, the IEP team will consult with someone to come in, help us set up the programming, monitor, make subtle adjustments as needed. Also, if we do have students that have perhaps a complex medical need, for example, a child with a head injury that may have been referred to special education, would need a certain kind of speech and language pathologist with those level of experiences to evaluate and develop programming, and so we have someone that we contract with that does that work for us.
So I assume in this one we had an increased need this coming year, so that's why I jumped this,
Yes.
irregularity of those numbers, okay.
Yep.
Good. Sure.
That is that again is a share of the SAU, or is that specific to Newington?
Specific to Newington.
So professional growth and library media services 6 and 7, and then we go into technology. Technology has a little bit of increase in the hardware, went down in contract services. If you want some particular questions, we have Brian here, or I can read through the details for you.
We're saving a lot in contracted services, $10,000. Are you doing that in-house now?
Yes.
Okay. Is that you personally doing it, or do you have?
Yes.
Okay, great, terrific.
In each school now, they have one common technology director, not each was out buying their own individual technologies. But I am able to give everybody the same page, you might say, and save some money.
Thank you. You're buying some new software and you're replacing some hardware?
Yes, there's some hardware that's end of life and needs to be replaced, the wireless, main switch, the firewall, so.
How old is it? I'm just curious.
The wireless is 7 or 8 years old. The firewalls usually go about 5 years where the software ends up. And the core switch, while it can still serve its purpose, if we're going to go in and we're going to reprogram the network, we want to make it as robust as possible. And so we want to replace that switch with a more robust switch that we can do stuff internally.
Is the software associated with the new hardware?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Brian, do you have kind of a 3 or 5 year plan of what you think needs to get replaced? And
Right now, we are just finishing up a 3-year technology plan. We're going to be working on developing one for this coming year. So for the hardware that the staff and students use, we have that in the hardware, and we are contracting with a company out of Portsmouth that does off-lease, 1-year off-lease, because Newington specializes in using Apple products. So what it allows us to do is roughly get 3 devices for what would cost us new 2. And what they do is Pete tells them exactly what he wants in these devices. They clone them out, and they deliver them. And we just set up the final little pieces of getting them on the network in fairness. And we've actually had Newington and Newcastle both use this company, and one of the value adds of this company is that they'll come in and do a full audit of the products that we have, because at some point they drop off precipitously, and we can sell, they will buy them back. So what they will do is they will forecast the best point to where we can sell them back at whatever price they'll give us. But it literally can be from $200 one year to $10 the next year. So they're helping us maximize some of that.
Is this a line item that you expect to grow?
No, not typically. It's gonna be predicated by student body growing, but not really.
Okay, I guess we can move on.
Okay, yep, on page 7 and 8 are your school board services. Those are pretty much the same as last year, a little bit of an increase in legal. On page 9, we have the district share of the SAU, so that's the only portion that shows the share for Newington share of the SAU budget, which actually went down a little bit due to the decrease that came through after they reduced the budget. And
Decrease in
your,
our evaluation.
Yeah.
well, once you put in the valuation and the ADM for 18-19, there's actually a schedule in here that has a pie chart that shows you where your apportionment is.
Okay.
And that's your, the 196,000 is your share for this.
The, just for those of you who are new, our dues for the supervisory union is a split between evaluation and enrollment. So it's half of one and half of the other. Take the average. So I think our evaluation went down. That's right, so we.
Yeah, I don't have the valuation chart with me. I gave you how your apportionment was done for the budget purposes.
Again, it's based on those two variables.
Right, it's the 2018 valuation and the 18-19 ADM. Or average daily
Does
membership.
that include the middle and high school students as well, or just elementary?
No, I think it's school-based, yeah. So it's
Yeah,
just the
because
ADM for our
So
district.
we include
Right,
those schools that have middle schools, their enrollment will be higher.
right.
But
Well, it's all based per, it just gets into the calculation, so.
we pay that to the Portsmouth.
Right, through the tuition line, yeah.
Okay.
The next set is on page 9 is all school-based, so that's principal, and various, costs associated with school level. So you'll see, an increase in the software. That's one of those examples where we charged out some software to the school, some school Power School, School Messenger. There's a guidance assessment, called STAR assessment, that was actually in guidance before it needed to be pulled back into the school base. So Brian worked closely making sure that the software programs are relative to where they're supposed to be charged at.
This is the kind of nitpicking we're famous for. I just noticed your custodial supplies went up about 30%. Any reason for that?
Yeah, 2 reasons why. One is that we're adding a in-house carpet cleaner.
Oh.
So we have the classroom carpets and such, and we've been renting one. And we found as though that it was more efficient for us to actually have one, that way instead of just cleaning them once a year thoroughly with a carpet cleaner, to be doing that several times a year. And the second piece that we're adding, proposing to add rather, is a ultraviolet bacterial cleaner, which you see frequently used in hospitals and things like that, but they go through and really disinfect the water fountains, the bathrooms, the door handles, and really make sure that we're doing the best job we can cleaning that school.
So those are one-time costs.
Okay, so on page 10, it had all of your facility lines. Maintenance
Just
and-
a question about salaries. How many weeks a year is that based on? How much time do your
For which
primary
position?
teachers, get off a year?
Their work year is governed by the collective bargaining agreement. I believe in Newington, it's 188 days per year. So it's teacher work days. Number of student contact days is 180. So basically, teachers work on the clock, if you will,
Yeah.
10 months out of the year. But the other 2 months, July and August, they're typically engaged in their own professional learning, perhaps working extended school year programs, variety of educational endeavors, or take time off. It's
Some
certainly
of
up to
that's
them.
required for certification, isn't it, to take these courses from time to time?
I think it's 30 hours every 3 years for certification, or 90, I can't remember now since I dropped mine. But
It's 75 hours every
75.
3 years.
75 for a certification, so principal certification or math teacher in high schools. I had 2, that was big. But every workshop hours count, and one summer boy said, if you take another workshop, you feel it, go ahead for some reason. And you spend a lot of time.
Yeah, and that's the 75 hours is like classroom hours.
It could be self-study, it could be
Oh.
workshops, it could be conferences, there's lots of different things you can do.
Okay.
But it's 25 hours a year per, it's over 3 years.
Okay, all right, so we left off on page 10 and 11, which still had all your facilities, so some of those lines are just up and down depending on the needs, from the building principal. On page 11, we go into transportation, that had a 3% increase on the contract that was negotiated, so you'll see those reflected in the lines. Page 12 is all down into your support and benefits, we have health insurance and all dental and all relative insurances that have to be
I know
paid out.
this is out of your control, but they're up a lot. I guess we all know that.
So they're based on the staff's plans, and then we have the obligation times the 7.1 GMR, which is the guaranteed maximum rate that Health Trust gives us. So we budgeted to that capacity in case we do have this full 7.1. And the dental obligation for the plans that we have currently, we have a 3.9% increase coming from Health Trust, so the obligation is a 3.9% in there as well. And then you have your straight FICA, retirement, they're all, I gave you reference materials that back those up as well, so you could see.
Just for the
The
board's
percentages.
info, what's a teacher's contribution towards health insurance, what percent? Is it 15?
Oh,
15.
15 and
85, 50.
85,
Yeah, it's
50.
like 5. You got different, I know there's.
We have the 4 districts, so.
Yeah, different picks.
Is that the same for dental as well?
Dental 0.
100%.
That's 100%.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, 100%.
Yeah, that was nice, I had that.
Oh, the teachers do. The town does.
I'm sorry.
Right, well, we pay 100%, there's small packages, I'd have to just pull those details to find them.
Who's the plan with?
Health Trust? Health Trust.
It's a Blue Cross Blue Shield.
This is
Well,
well
then
beyond
Delta
what you
Dental.
guys prepared for in terms of health insurance
Right.
costs.
Yeah, I have all
This
kinds of
year.
documents and stuff for you. I don't know. I can
You're
pull
getting into
details.
deep waters here.
Right,
Hot topic with other departments.
right. On page 13, we have maintenance objective and facilities. Mr. Latchaw wanted to reduce that, just seeing the needs from last year to this year and trying to reserve some funds in other areas. So that was a reduction. I
Which
don't
one
know
was
if
that,
questions
Mindy? I'm
about
sorry, I
that.
missed that.
That was on page 13 for facilities. Maintenance objectives went down from 25,000 to 5,000 for projects. So not as many projects will be needed in the upcoming year.
Oh, school construction.
And then we go into our tuition for middle school. High school comes later in another line, and in between that, there's special education costs, because now we're hitting the lines that are targeting middle school costs and high school costs. So that's why there's special ed in there as well, it's just because of the location. So these next 2 pages have middle school and high school costs, and that brings us to the end of the budget.
Just a point, we have a very handy hands-on principal and custodian, they save us a lot of money on maintenance.
Mhm.
Do you, anybody have the numbers? One that's missing here is the 19-20 actual.
Only halfway through the year.
The 1920, actually?
It's
Yeah.
We're in that right
Are
now.
we, correct, are you gonna use the 25K that was there, that was budgeted this year?
Or
I'm
maintenance.
sorry, for maintenance and
Oh,
benefits, yeah.
I don't think we've, I don't know how much is spent of that already.
Well, I mean, that, yeah,
I don't,
currently, I mean, hoping that we don't, we were able to save some money and some different things, but we did have some things come up
Is that the
that
fire
were
alarm?
unanticipated. Yeah, we had to replace our fire alarm panel and a bunch of fire alarm code of things that We're unanticipated that ran about $16,000.
And again, we have a fund in case there's any major things break.
I thought that was in here somewhere else.
Yes, the trust fund schedule, you should have that as well.
Security and fire system alarm, the security and fire systems, 2660. It doesn't include major repairs, I guess.
Those mostly cover our regular inspections and annual repairs.
Gotcha.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of the budget, and you'll see that the proposed budget is $2,185,347. That number ties into the graph for the general fund operating budget, and then of course when you add in the special revenue funds and the food service funds, then you get the gross operating budget that's in the warrant one article, Article 1.
Okay. The rest of the tabs are just background information, I believe.
Right, resources, the trust funds are in there, different schedules for our insurance and for the retirement.
So, like every other budget, we vote the whole budget, which includes grant income and other non-tax raised income.
Right.
So we have, I think we have a motion on the floor for that amount. What was it, 2,300,000? Go back to
2,259,131. That's Article 1.
Was it 2,259,000?
Right, 131.
131, okay. So
Correct.
That's the motion that's on the floor now. Is there any further questions or discussion on the motion? Okay, if there is none, I would take a vote. Remember, this is really a notional vote to roll it ahead to the final vote after the public hearing. All in favor of moving forth the recommendation of 2.259,131 million? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstention?
Can I interrupt you, sorry, John?
Sure, all right.
I have 2.185. Is that what I'm looking at?
No,
right here.
One article.
That's general fund.
That's
First
it.
page.
That's money that's coming in from
Disrupting
budget
this whole
policy.
thing here.
So we'll we add it into it.
Sorry.
Yeah, we have to
Aye.
add the special revenue and food service.
Aye.
Good. What's that?
A motion and a
For
second.
what?
Way back when.
We did it.
We did it at the beginning.
Okay, good. We can move on to Article 2, and I'll take a motion for somebody to raise and appropriate the sum of $20,000 to recommend that
So
amount.
moved.
Is there a second? Okay, second. All right. And this is the Building and Grounds Expendable Trust Fund, which is, what Jack just spoke to, I think.
But that's one of the two we have.
Yeah, how much is in that fund now?
I just had that open.
Oh, good.
I
I always ask that question.
I had that schedule, hold on, it's in your book too, if anybody else
Oh, is
can.
it? Okay.
Yeah,
Let's
it's
get
under
it faster than I
five.
can.
Facilities maintenance balance, July 1/2018 is 40,000.
I'm guessing somewhere around 80, but
It will be,
So it's
right now it's at
$60,875 as of the end of June.
Okay, so that
Just
would
a
bring
minimal
up to
interest
about
rate.
80.
yeah, I know when they did the one for the town years
we are
ago,
making-
I think this one, it's gonna be capped at 100 anyway. It's like,
Okay.
when the septic system failed years back, put it up.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And it's coming out of the, what do you call it, the unassigned fund balance, so it's really no effect on the tax rate. It's like it comes out of surplus.
Good, any further discussion on Article 2? Putting another 20,000 in, bringing it up to about 80,000. If there's no further discussion, all in favor of recommending Article 2? Say
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? Okay, good. I think that we have completed our school business.
I have something that's kind of related to the school funding, and it's also kind of related back to what we voted on last week.
Yeah.
And just look at the minutes, good for a minute. It says legal budget review. Remember I explained that there are, quote, donor town issues in several seacoast towns we may wind up. So I just got the latest legislative update a couple
Okay,
days
thank
ago.
you. Yeah.
And there's a commission that was formed last year to study school funding
Mhm.
by the legislature. And it held its first meeting January 13th, and it's gonna have another on January 27th. I don't know what the original date was, they have the report finalized, but there's a Senate Bill 558 extending the reporting date of the commission to Scotty school funding, because they had delays because of the budget impacts last year and all that. They wanna move it out to next January, so if they do, that helps us financially this year for our legal vote.
So it delays any reckoning.
Yeah, I mean, the report comes out and then the legislature goes from there.
Yeah, those of you who are new to this committee or new to town, a few years ago, our tax rate went up, what, a couple of dollars?
My tax bill almost up 1,000.
Yeah, a couple of dollars a thousand per.
About 2,000.
We're paying
About
over,
2,000.
I was,
Year
it
2000.
was
The
over
year
11.
2000, that long ago.
Yeah.
I'm just blind.
Donor, you mean when we had donors and received it?
Donor and receiver
Oh,
now, there's a different formula now where
That was a-
it still costs us
time up.
a little bit of money, but nothing like what it did before. Okay, if there's nothing else, I wanna thank you, yes,
Can I ask a
Mr.
question?
Marconi.
Nobody asked the question, so I might ask it. What is the cost per child coming up this year for the town? It was originally 30 some odd dollars a thousand. I know you dropped it with the enrollment down, Peter. Can you give us a rough estimate? I wouldn't hold it to you, no?
I have to pull the yearly report.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
I have a report that I don't have with me, so if I can get it back to you
That's
somehow
fine.
through somebody.
Because somebody may ask me out on the field, what is the exact cost per child for school, and I gotta answer. Thank you.
We could divide the projected enrollment of 60 by the elementary instruction.
Right.
And at 60, the price will go down per child.
Correct. That's
It's
what I'm
more
hoping-
expensive.
That's what I'm hoping to hear.
Yeah, right. It's more expensive than tuition into a 1,500 student facility like Portsmouth,
Absolutely.
obviously.
We can see that right in the book here, but thank you, John.
But okay, I think that, we have a lot of faith in the quality. We provide you good funds, but I think you spend it wisely and we get good value. I tell people all the time, I said, basically, we're as good as a private school. Newington has that kind of, is able to offer that kind, just like you talk about with this extra teacher. Specialized instruction, flexible instruction.
I've yet to hear substantial criticism of the school, that's for sure, so.
Realtors love it because that's one of their selling points. So they
Oh, yeah,
try to sell
yeah.
it.
Little harbor of Newington. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming, all of you, because I do appreciate you all had something important to add, so it was nice that you came.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Quite the coach.
That is a full court.
Have a good evening.
I think we can move on because these are fairly straightforward, this is a public hearing. I mean, a public meeting. The first thing, a couple of other orders of business, just out of housekeeping, is, apparently, the selectmen's budget had the wrong number for Coast.
Thank you.
And it's $4,068 less.
So there was when we had gone through that, there was thank you very much.
And I thank you.
There was a increase
Thank you.
to the Coast Bus Fund when we went over it, right?
Right.
And is that equal to $4,068?
There's still an increase, I believe, but, it's 4,000,
Less, the increase is smaller.
the number,
So
right?
what was the total increase?
Went from 34 to 38.
That's about the whole
And
thing.
then, what should it have been?
34,236. Thank you, Sal.
Good night.
Thank you.
Night.
Oh, yeah, okay, which would have been
16.
a decrease of about $60, $63.
So in
Thank you.
2019, Coast was at 33,569. So it's
Say that number again, please, Martin, sorry.
33,569,
Yeah.
and we're moving to 34,236.
Based upon what?
Revised number, sorry?
Based upon what? Where does that number come from?
They are providing increased ridership for Newington. We'll have 3 stops starting this summer
Right.
on an on-call basis.
Well, it's only about 2 or 3%, but we're gonna have 3 stops instead of 2? Or something?
Right, and before it was very restrictive, but now you can just call and built from Big
Can they come into the residential, or is this still
Yes.
just up in the commercial zone?
Right, one stop is at Town Hall,
Right,
another
I
stop
think
is
they talked
down by
about for years they
Shattuck
probably
Way,
did that.
and the
So-
third stop,
I thought it was the police station, but that would be too close to
Yeah,
town, I don't know.
I can find out.
So actually, there's a stop here at the
Right.
town hall.
right,
Which
And
is
you have
a
to
good
call
move.
for it,
yes, you
but
do have to
but you don't have to be
call.
handicapped or anything, you
Right,
can just call and
right.
meet them. Okay, they give you a projected time, and they follow a schedule.
So, Martha, question is, so this is like a $600 or so increase. Who comes up with that number? Is that a bill we get? Is that a recommended contribution we're supposed to do? Who decides this?
The Coast Board of Directors, we have a representative, Dennis Hebert, who sits on that, comes up with these figures. And it's split between the various towns that you see on the chart.
Yeah. Which is not an obligation, right? It's just that's what they're asking for.
Right.
Gotcha, okay.
So we gotta go up or down on the bottom line, you say?
We need to go down on the bottom line.
So we'll do that, wait till public hearing?
I would say do it now so we can get that adjusted and recommended. We're only recommending the adjustment. The
Yeah.
Selectmen have already made that adjustment. So I would take a motion to reduce our total selectmen's budget by $4,068. Is that correct?
We still have a new bottom number. When we get the paperwork for the public hearing, that page, maybe we should place.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But if are we comfortable voting on that?
Yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. One other administrative note you were gonna mention about the other 2,000, we found a $2,000 savings in your budget. Were you gonna reduce that as well?
Oh, that, Martha, remember we had two different numbers, the bottom line, last week?
There was
Oh, yeah.
one item that you had pointed out was actually $2,000 high. And so we reduced the selectmen's budget by $2,000.
And which,
Our budget,
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
executive
administration
office
budget.
Yeah, the selectmen's budget, so that currently the budget committee is coming in at $2,000 less than the selectmen. I think it's in
I
the-
remember the discussion, I don't remember the item.
That's the fire department.
Fire department.
2,000 that Jamie
Cost.
That's
from
not it.
correct.
equipment maintenance.
That's not it. That was from January 7th.
Oh, okay.
We're talking about last week, which was the 14th, and there was a different,
Was it the maintenance on Echo or something like that?
No. So it's in the 15 minutes that you looked
it
at,
should
you
be
could
in
have
the
figured
15
it?
minutes, yeah.
Okay, 2,000.
Anyway, we've already acted on it, but I didn't know whether the selectmen were gonna change their budget to reflect that. They don't have to. But sometimes it's less confusing at the public hearing if we're in agreement that our figures are the same.
we will find it and bring that up to the board.
Yeah.
Okay.
We agreed on it last week, that we would do that.
Yeah, you did, all right, so you already voted it.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we'll adjust it by,
So we need to adjust it,
yeah.
that too.
In your budgets
Yeah.
too.
I think it always already is adjusted, so right now, the selectmen and the budget committee have reached the same figures.
Okay, the same bottom.
Thank you.
The same
Okay,
line.
got it.
Okay. The next thing is the fire station additional warrant article, and you don't need to act on that. We remember that we postponed that warrant article, and this was the $150,000 addition. There's some confusion on whether it's needed or not. Selectmen thought that it perhaps should be done, but the chief is saying that he doesn't really need it this year. He can get by and maybe look at it again, that's what I understand.
Plus the discussion with the architect.
And the discussion with the architect. So again, when this comes up to public hearings, we can either recommend, I don't know if the selectmen are gonna change their the selectmen are recommending $150,000 for this edition. And it's a warrant article, it's not a capital reserve, it's a straight shot.
Right.
$150,000 warrant
I
article,
think it's 125.
Oh,
yeah.
125,000. So if the selectmen recommend that, we may or may not recommend it, depending on what the fire department says or what the chief says.
I can give you a very brief summary. of the meeting with the architect because there was a misunderstanding. So we met with the architect. First, the building is structurally sound. Second, we support, the selectmen support the addition. This has been recommended by 3 chiefs. And for health and safety, we recommend the 125. The third thing is, and this is where the misunderstanding came, the current building, floor plan, and configuration. If we wanted to change that, and you approached the $400,000 figure, it would not be an economically prudent move. However, the building can easily accept an addition when and if that day comes that it's needed. And the last thing is the roof still has life in it. So those are the major items that.
Yeah, you remember there's a lot of discussion. You're on the fire board, aren't you?
I'm the chairman.
That's what I thought. Okay, it would be nice, that the fire department maybe before we have a public hearing, you two, the selectmen and the fire engineers can come to some agreement. I mean, if there's a disagreement, it's hard for us to recommend this when you've got one side saying we don't need it or don't want it, and one side says we do need it. But anyway, that's just my advice. But we can't really act on this now, I don't see any point on it. But we're going to have to recommend or not recommend that particular warrant article after the public hearing. So, yes.
Can I ask a question about this? We received, I think, this.
Can you speak up a little,
Yeah,
please?
so I think at the end of the last meeting, or at some point, I was handed this piece of paper.
That's a summary of our meeting that we had,
Right.
the second meeting with the
With
architect.
TMS, and my question on what you just said, Mr. Lancho, would be the insulation at the roof. They write, as the existing roof does have life in it, how, which is a total grammatical error, the roof and insulation are updated should be reviewed together before finalizing any action. So I'm curious if.
I can explain that.
Yeah.
What the architect said is, when the day comes that the roof is needed, that would be the time to address the insulation.
Okay.
And
So
when
we
we
wouldn't
look,
need
there's
insulation.
very little difference, surprisingly, between the heating bill with the police station and the heating bill with the fire station. It's so close that doing one of those without doing 2 together just wouldn't make any sense. So when the roof is ready to be done, that's when he said, look at the insulation.
So the budget doesn't include insulating the roof currently?
Excuse me?
So the budget currently does not include insulating?
No,
Okay.
It's just an addition.
it's just the addition and an upgrade. of the
Yes,
bathrooms.
Mike.
Emily, what the architect added to us is if we do decide to redo the roof, when we have to do it, that's when we decide to insulate it. We can insulate it from the top down, not from the inside out, which I thought was interesting. He said it could be done, it would still have a good viable roof on the fire station.
You don't have to get that spray foam and spray and stuff, or you would want to be there.
Jack, I don't know. I'm not that knowledgeable
Former
now.
fireman does that for business.
I really don't want to get into a substantive discussion,
Right.
because that should be reserved for the public hearing, whether we're gonna support this or not. I'm just suggesting that maybe the fire engineers and chief and the selectmen give this some more discussion among you, so that maybe we'll have a consistent recommendation from the
If you
two
don't-
principal parties.
If you don't mind, Chairman, though, I'm still on the fence of deciding whether or not it's appropriate to move with a $125,000 warrant article or not.
Yeah,
Right?
so am I. Yeah.
So, if, just super objectively, maybe I can ask John. John. Okay. Negative pressure storage room and extractor which is a part of the 31 by 15. That's the main need of this project.
Just to take all the bunker gear and the machine to clean the bunker gear and put it in one room.
Okay.
So that everything dealing with the particles that cause cancer are in one room, it's pressurized, and everything is there.
Okay.
That was the intent of the addition.
Okay, so that is
If I'm
that is
correct.
number one priority for the Board of Fire Engineers, that is the reason that we're looking at an addition or needing space.
And the restrooms.
Negative and the restrooms.
Yeah, to help.
The negative pressure room and updating restrooms, right?
Yes.
So you're in support of this warrant?
I have,
I mean, I'm talking about the Board of Fire Engineers. Are you partic-
I don't really think it's fair to ask one person from the
No,
board
I
who
agree with you.
happens to be sitting here.
He is the
amongst
chair,
us.
though. I mean, he's.
I will say that, yeah, the Board of Fire Engineers and Selectmen need to sit down to discuss this warrant article. The feeling from the chief was, because of everything that was being asked by our budget and the increase and all that, pulling the warrant article for this year was more or less saving grace on the town and the tax rate.
Okay, all right.
So I definitely will arrange, we'll get together and talk
Okay.
about it.
I mean,
We'll
so-
do it for public hearing.
You know, I will say this to the public, I'm likely to ask the chief, can you get by with another year? It sounds like you can.
The chief will probably,
Can I address the elephant in the room though, is that if we move the $125,000 off and cancel it out, is this in preparation for a new fire department?
New building?
Yes.
Well, John, according to the architect, if the need ever came, that building could support an addition. So,
Up or sideways?
right out,
Sideways.
right out sideways.
Go back to Roy Greenleaf days, he always wanted the second floor.
Hold on, John, can you answer that question?
I will say for, trying to figure out how I'll word this the right way. Space-wise, I'm not saying that we go out tomorrow and spend the money to build a brand new fire station. But I also don't wanna see the town drop tons of money into a building that's, I mean, electrical wise, to run some stuff, you're gonna have to update the electrical in that building. So I don't wanna keep adding cost. I mean, there's always a way to make the existing building work. So it's gonna be at whatever the town, you know, the selectmen and the architect come up with, basically.
You don't wanna be between a rock and a hard place here, where you don't feel like appropriating $125,000 to a thing that even the fire chief believes they can get along without.
Really?
However,
Really?
is the initiative
It's, you know,
by the Board of Fire
I
Engineers
think
to.
the point is, if that building is starting to get old, and I'm just wrong, I don't know. But, it might have been more appropriate if John said, well, we can hold off a year, and the taxpayers, all warrant articles aren't affecting us that much. Maybe put in a cap reserve, so when finally, if you're gonna build a new, you're gonna bond it. And the more you have to put down on it, the less you're gonna have to bond.
Or
Just-
if there is a joint study
Right,
that says, you know, over the next year or two, this is what's gonna take to make this building viable for the next 20 years.
yeah.
Or, this is-
Well,
you know,
like
if this
you
is the
said,
plan, then that's a bigger project that we could vote
It's
on.
like an old car, the more you put into it sometimes.
Oh, sure.
Mr. Chairman, may I just address that, why the selectmen, the 125, we put it in? Because the last three chiefs and boards have told us that they need that room for health and safety, because it's a cancer thing, they can get all the stuff out of their equipment, and it's a health safety thing. That's why,
Yeah.
you know, I don't wanna build a new building and put additions on, but a health safety thing
That's right.
regarding the firemen and looking at the whole thing. That's why the selectmen have said, we think it should be done.
Mhm.
If, you know, it's their call, but it's been, I've been on the board 3 years now, and it's beating in my head, we need this for safety and health.
Yeah, okay. It may be that the chief thinks he can address that health safety with a different plan.
Absolutely, we have
And we may ask him that at the public hearing. But anyway, this deserves some discussion, because it's a big dollar item, and it's got some future ramifications. And so I don't know if we wanna discuss it further, other than, you know, my
We'll
advice
get
to all
together,
parties.
we'll get
to try to
together,
get
Mr.
together.
Chairman.
Okay, all right, good. Any other further?
I do, I have one more.
Yes,
quick
sure.
bit. I don't know how many billets are open, but the, whose people are up this year? How many openings, Eleanor, is it three?
For what?
For budget committee for 3 years?
Three, yes.
Typically
Three.
three.
Sign-ups start
Brandon,
tomorrow, and the
Jamie,
end
they
the
started
30th.
today.
Today? Okay.
Brandon, you're up, Jamie, I wrote them down, who's on?
Maybe Jen?
So,
No,
No,
she
No,
ran
she's
last year,
got
hold on,
that
I'll,
down.
I'll come up with it.
Brandon,
is
Jamie.
it Sandy Sweetie by any chance?
Nope,
That's a good point.
sorry, I'll get it, I wrote it down, so I'd be
Just a
prepared, you
reminder.
Yeah,
know.
good point. Mr. Monica, could we ask you to send a notice to those three people?
Yes,
Just to do that.
Martha, if you could make sure.
Re-upping is mandatory.
Well,
Martha has it like.
you won't be getting a new, you won't be getting a new, you won't be getting a new school board rep next year.
Those are the three of them.
yeah, he's in.
Alan is, his daughter moved to a different house, so he's the handyman for 3 weeks of intensive rebuilding the house. So he'll be,
Good man. Be a new school board rep on the board next year.
what's that?
There'll be a new school board rep here next year.
Oh, this next week, next year? Okay.
After 27 years. I'm getting up there, I can't remember anymore.
Okay, if there are no further business,
Move to adjourn.
I would, is there a second? All right, all in favor?
Did it again.
Thank you very much. We will see you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
2 weeks from
Now we're
today.
gonna be able to get some time.
Okay.
Public hearing.